Lara stepped off the crowded metro and into a world that shimmered like glass and gold. The building in front of her, Maison de Mode, towered with arrogance, its sleek, mirrored facade reflecting a city that had long forgotten women like her. Her shoes, scuffed from the morning rush, clicked unevenly against the marble floor as she entered the grand lobby. She tugged at her plain beige kurta, suddenly self-conscious under the cold stare of fashion executives in sculpted black dresses and towering heels. Her cotton dupatta fluttered slightly as the air conditioning blasted from above, reminding her again she did not belong here. But she had an interview and hope. The receptionist looked up, blinking in surprise before her lips twisted into a smile too practiced to be kind. "Delivery?" the receptionist asked. "No," Lara replied softly. "I have an interview, design intern Lara Kapoor." The smile turned brittle. A few quiet giggles came from two assistants nearby, their eyes barely lifting from their phones. One of them whispered, not quietly enough, "Must be some charity case." Heat crept up Lara's neck, but she said nothing. She was used to this, the mocking, the assumptions, still it stung. A towering woman in a cinched red blazer walked by. She paused, heels clicking to a stop. Her lipstick was bold, her glare bolder. "You're Lara?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Devika Rana, head of creative. Follow me." Her voice was sharp and metallic. Lara did. They entered a cavernous open studio, walls lined with mannequins dressed in gowns made of mirror shards, feathers, and fabrics worth more than Lara's monthly rent. Interns darted like bees, and somewhere, a photographer barked instructions over house music. Devika stopped near a table piled with swatches. "This is not an NGO, you understand that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Where did you study?" "Govind Design College, on scholarship." Devika's lips twitched. "Never heard of it. Do you know who I am?" "You're one of India's top designers. You showcased at Paris Fashion Week last year," Lara said, her voice calm. For a split second, Devika seemed impressed, then the moment snapped. "But I didn't get there by dragging people like you into my studio. Let's see your portfolio." Lara reached into her cloth tote, carefully removing a folder. As she opened it, someone walking by bumped her shoulder, deliberate, and the folder slipped from her hand. Sketches scattered across the floor like fallen petals. The room froze. An intern laughed, "Hand-drawn, no iPad." Devika stepped over one of the sketches without looking down. "We're done here." Lara knelt, picking up each paper with shaking hands. Her dream had never felt smaller. "You can leave now," Devika said curtly, already turning away. And just like that, Lara was dismissed, like lint brushed off a silk jacket. But as she stood by the studio exit, portfolio clutched to her chest, she turned to look back one last time. Her eyes scanned the room, not with despair but with something harder, a quiet seed of something old and dangerous, resolve. She would be back, not as an intern. Before Lara Kapoor ever stood in front of Maison de Mode, heart in her throat, she was the golden girl of Govind Design College, not wealthy but brilliant. Her sketches were raw, breathtaking, a fusion of tradition and modernity that stunned even the harshest critics on the jury panel. She didn't wear luxury, but she designed it in her head every night before sleep. Back then, she had someone who believed in her, Mira Saxena, a senior professor and former couturier who had taken Lara under her wing. Mira spotted Lara's talent the way one might recognize a rare diamond buried in mud. Their bond was unshakable. At least, that's what Lara thought. "You are not like the rest," Mira had told her during a late-night design review, "and that terrifies people. Let it." With Mira's help, Lara won the National Emerging Designer Contest in her final year, a feat unheard of for a girl from a small-town government college. Fashion magazines started calling. Internships were offered. One in particular stood out, a summer fellowship under Devika Rana. But there was someone else too, Anjali, Lara's closest friend, roommate, and confidant. They shared instant noodles, deadlines, heartbreaks, and even late-night dreams of one day launching their own label. Anjali, though less talented, was fiercely ambitious. Then everything unraveled. It started with whispers in the hallway, a strange call from a magazine editor asking about her copycat designs, a dropped offer from a major brand citing plagiarism concerns. Confused and devastated, Lara went to Mira, but the warm mentor who once praised her genius now looked at her with cold detachment. "You submitted someone else's work?" Mira asked. "No, I'd never do that." But the evidence was stacked: screenshots, sketches uploaded under another name, Anjali's, identical. Lara couldn't understand how or why. Then the final blow came. She walked into the college boardroom, summoned by administration. Sitting at the head of the table was Mira, her voice calm but deadly. "We have no choice but to suspend you from the fellowship list." "But it's my work," Lara shouted, tears in her eyes. "You cannot prove it," Mira replied. "And Devika Rana doesn't want scandal around her brand. She's pulled your internship. I advised her to." That was the moment Lara realized what had happened. Anjali had stolen her designs, but Mira had helped cover it up. Why? Lara would learn later. Mira had accepted a lucrative position at Devika Rana's label right after recommending Anjali for Lara's spot. It wasn't about truth, it was about access, politics, power. She was shut out overnight. Emails went unanswered. Interview calls dried up. Even the local design stores wouldn't look at her portfolio. Online, whispers turned to noise: fraud, copycat, attention seeker. It was the end of her fashion career before it had even begun. Her father, already battling illness, couldn't understand what had happened. "But weren't you the top student? What happened?" "I trusted the wrong people," she replied. She packed her things and moved back to her tiny hometown. Her mother suggested she teach tailoring to local girls. It's still fashion, beta, but Lara didn't want to teach stitches. She wanted to build empires. Months turned into years, and then one night while returning from a tutoring session, a black car stopped beside her. The window rolled down. It was Rishan Kapoor, once a childhood friend, now a business tycoon. They hadn't spoken in years, but he hadn't forgotten her. "You disappeared," he said. She had. They reconnected slowly. He admired her fire, the way she hadn't let life make her small. She admired his sharp mind, his loyalty. Their friendship rekindled something she'd thought was lost. He asked her to marry him on a rainy evening with no diamonds, just a simple silver ring and a promise: "I'll protect your dreams like my own." Now, 3 years later, with Rishan quietly acquiring shares in industries no one thought he cared about, including fashion, Lara found herself at the gates of Maison de Mode once more. Not just to apply for an internship, but to reclaim her name. As an owner, the ballroom shimmered under chandeliers the size of small cars, flooding the space with a golden glow meant to flatter silk gowns and drown out imperfections. It was the annual Maison de Mode Gala, a crown jewel in the elite fashion calendar. Industry moguls, international influencers, and magazine editors brushed shoulders in curated chaos, every movement calculated for camera angles and clout. Lara stood near the edge of the crowd, clutching her modest clutch an invitation with both hands, her sari elegant but understated, a nod to heritage, not trends. She had been invited anonymously, an unmarked envelope delivered to her doorstep days ago with nothing but a time, date, and RSVP link. Something in her said to go, and so she did. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, smiling politely, eyes scanning. And then she saw them: Anjali, radiant in a metallic gown, posing with a champagne flute for a photographer. Just beside her, Devika Rana, dressed like royalty in blood-red velvet, was laughing at something a foreign buyer said. When Devika's eyes landed on Lara, her laughter stopped. Anjali turned, two wine-red lips parting in shock before stretching into a smirk. "Lara Kapoor," Devika said, stepping forward with faux surprise. "Crashing parties now, or did you come to collect old sketches?" A few heads turned, someone gasped, phones started to rise. Lara held her ground. "I received an invitation." Devika plucked the card from Lara's hand and held it up, inspecting it like a forgery. "Interesting, we must have lowered the security filter this year." Laughter erupted around them, forced, brittle, loud. Anjali joined in. "I think it's kind of sweet. Our little intern never gave up, still clinging to dreams she didn't earn." More phones were pointed now. Whispers turned to open mockery. "Wasn't she the girl who got blacklisted for plagiarism? Didn't she cry on Twitter once about being sabotaged? Oh my God, this is that girl." Security began to approach two suited men who looked like they'd rather be managing rock stars. One of them leaned in toward Lara. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm not causing a scene," Lara said quietly. "But you're becoming one," Devika cut in with a sharp smile. "And we wouldn't want our guests to feel uncomfortable, would we?" There it was, the same dismissal as years ago, but this time in sequins and under 1,000 lights. A camera flash went off in her face. Somewhere, a livestream was capturing every second. "Go on, dear," Anjali said, waving her off like a waitress. "Let us handle fashion." For a moment, Lara said nothing. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears like war drums. She could feel every eye in the room on her. She had two choices: flee with dignity or stay and risk total ruin. She took a step forward. And then, calmly from her clutch, she pulled out a single card, matte black, embossed. She held it out not to Devika but to the security guard. "This is your new executive guest clearance card," she said clearly, "issued by your parent company's new owner." The man blinked. "I'm sorry. I suggest you verify it with your tech desk," she added, and then looked Devika directly in the eyes. "Unless your fashion house hasn't updated their takeover notifications yet." Devika's face shifted. It was brief, a flicker of something raw behind her perfect contour. The crowd stilled. The smirks faded. One of the photographers lowered his camera, sensing a change in the wind. "I don't understand," Devika muttered. "You will," Lara said, "very soon." And she walked away, not out of the ballroom, but deeper into it, toward the main event, toward the mic, toward the next chapter. Because the mockery was over. The reckoning had just begun. Lara stood beneath the soft glow of the gala stage's overhead lights, the hum of disbelief still buzzing behind her. Conversations had turned into murmurs, murmurs into questions. The audience, once aloof and unbothered, was now alert. All eyes followed her, confused but captivated. She wasn't on the program. She wasn't on any influencer list. And yet here she was, walking with the composure of someone who belonged. The MC, startled but unsure whether to interfere, took a nervous step aside as Lara reached the center podium. With steady hands, she picked up the mic. "Some of you know me, most of you don't," she began, voice even but edged in steel. "My name is Lara Kapoor. I was once accused of stealing designs that were mine. I was blacklisted by this industry. Tonight I'm here not to ask for forgiveness, but to set the record straight." A ripple moved through the crowd like a gust of wind over silk. Devika Rana, rooted by the champagne fountain, looked frozen in place. Anjali stood beside her, pale and twitching. Cameras turned. Live streams flickered to life. And then, with perfect timing, Lara lifted her other hand, holding up a sleek silver flash drive. The massive LED screen behind her flickered, then lit up with a dramatic whoosh. A series of images appeared, hand-drawn sketches from 5 years ago, Lara's old designs, side by side with the final collections Anjali had presented under her own name. The matches were undeniable: color palettes, stitch placements, embroidery concepts. Even the names of the pieces, Twilight Daga, Nirmata Flow, were identical. "This is not opinion," Lara said. "This is time-stamped evidence. Every file you see here was backed up on my personal cloud the year I graduated, including metadata, dates, and geotags. I also recovered deleted emails thanks to a tech consultant who, incidentally, now works for Maison de Mode's own cybersecurity division." Gasps audible now. Someone dropped a glass. The next slide, an email chain, Anjali forwarding Lara's portfolio to Mira Saxena. Subject line: "Let's switch this for mine, same body type." A journalist stood up. "Is this authenticated?" Lara nodded. "You'll find the notarized affidavit in your inboxes, sent 10 minutes ago, along with a legal statement from the tech assistant who helped uncover this and a signed admission from Mira Saxena herself. She came clean last month. Early onset dementia made her rethink the people she protected." Dead silence. Even the music had stopped. Lara continued, "But this is more than just a theft of designs. This was systemic. It was silence, weaponized, powerful names who buried a young woman's career to protect their own." She turned slowly, letting her words hang in the air. "I was never the fraud, I was the threat." Behind her, the screen changed again, this time showing an internal memo from K&A Holdings, the conglomerate recently rumored to have acquired controlling interest in Maison de Mode. The memo was signed by the new board chairman, Rishan Kapoor. Devika's mouth parted slightly, color draining from her face. "You see," Lara added with a soft smile, "my husband believes in investing in truth and talent, even the kind this industry tried to bury." Whispers exploded into voices now. Phones were raised high, hashtags already trending. Lara Kapoor, fashion fraud, truth walked in heels. A second journalist called out, "What happens now?" Lara met his eyes, clear and calm. "What happens now," she said, "is accountability. From everyone who cheered while I was humiliated, from those who used silence as a shield, and from those who called themselves gatekeepers while slamming doors in the face of talent." Then she stepped back from the podium, the silence erupting into questions, flashes, and applause. Some clapped slowly, others awkwardly, but the shift had begun. The mic had been dropped, not in rage, but with precision. And the world of fashion had just been redressed. The aftermath of Lara's revelation at the Maison de Mode Gala spread like wildfire across the fashion world. Overnight, news outlets flooded the internet with headlines. The Lara Kapoor comeback, stolen talent exposed at fashion gala, Devika Rana and protege under fire. Hashtags like proof in the pattern and Lara was right dominated every trending list. What began as whispered doubt transformed into a full-blown reckoning. But Lara knew that public sentiment was fickle. A single PR spin, a carefully crafted denial, and everything she'd fought for could evaporate. That was why she had planned her next move not for shock but for permanence. 3 days later, the Fashion Federation of India held an emergency closed-door hearing at their headquarters in Mumbai. A sleek modern structure with glass panels and floating staircases, the building had never hosted this much press. Reporters camped outside like vultures around a carcass, hungry for blood and truth alike. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with anticipation and concealed panic. On one side sat Devika Rana, her legal team, and Anjali, now visibly shaken, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, dark circles barely hidden behind heavy concealer. Beside them sat 2 representatives from Devika's label's PR division, whispering furiously. On the other side sat Lara, composed in an ivory trouser suit and gold-threaded dupatta, flanked by her legal advisor, Mr. Arvind Duz, a seasoned ex-lawyer turned industry compliance expert. With them was Rishan Kapoor, silent but commanding, his presence a statement in itself. At the head of the long table sat Mrs. Rima Kathari, president of the federation, flanked by a panel of board members. Cameras were not allowed inside. Phones were taken. Only documented truth would speak today. Mrs. Kathari tapped her pen on the folder before her. Ms. Kapoor, you've made several grave allegations. You now have the floor to present proof of design theft, academic fraud, and defamation. Lara stood slowly and nodded. She turned to the digital projector. With your permission, I'd like to walk the panel through a short timeline and attach physical and digital documentation. Permission granted. The room dimmed as the screen behind her came to life. Lara began with scanned pages from her original hand-drawn designs, each signed and time-stamped via backup software, automatically synced to her email at the time. Every design bore her initials and notations, details only the original creator could have made, side notes, fabric sourcing plans, stitch count changes. These designs were uploaded to my Google Drive during my final year project review, she explained. The data is verifiable through metadata and confirmed by Google's affidavit, attached in tab 2. Now, the screen showed slides from Anjali's debut collection presentation to Devika Rana's label internship panel. Nearly all pieces bore eerie resemblance to Lara's originals, some altered with trivial color changes, others copied outright. The room went still. Anjali visibly squirmed. The next evidence was sharper. Lara had printed and digitally submitted recovered emails from Anjali to Mira. These emails, once deleted, had been restored by her tech consultant using cached backups from her old laptop, which she'd never thrown away. In one message, Anjali wrote, "Should I rescan the sketches? They're still in Lara's folder. I can make new versions but need your opinion. Won't take long." In Mira's reply, "Yes, clean them up, keep body type same, add lace to third one to make it less obvious." Gasps rippled across the boardroom. One of the Federation members muttered, "God help us." Lara continued without looking at Devika or Anjali. 3 months ago, I visited Mira Saxena at her care facility. She's battling cognitive decline, but her memory of what happened, still sharp. The screen changed again, this time displaying a notarized statement from Mira herself. "I allowed a theft of designs to protect my position at Devika Rana's company. Lara Kapoor was innocent. Anjali Sharma was the impersonator. I helped orchestrate the switch." Signed, witness, stamped. Lara presented records from boutique recruiters, HR departments, and one global fashion label, each one blacklisting her based on questionable ethics or internal advice from Devika's team. She showed formal denials with identical language across unrelated companies. Notice how the wording is almost uniform, Mr. Des added. This suggests a coordinated suppression of Ms. Kapoor's prospects. Here, Lara's advisor took over. Under Indian Copyright Law Section 13, Ms. Kapoor's designs are protected from the moment of creation. Theft and redistribution without consent is a criminal offense, particularly when used for commercial benefit. We've filed with the Intellectual Property Tribunal and have requested temporary injunctions against Devika Rana's Fall collection, which continues to feature these stolen works. A low groan of frustration escaped from Devika's side. Mrs. Kathari leaned forward. Ms. Rana, Ms. Sharma, do you wish to respond? Devika opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lawyer intervened. We will be releasing an official statement shortly. For now, we request time to review. You've had years to review, Rima Kathari cut in sharply. We're here to judge evidence, not feelings. She turned to Lara. Ms. Kapoor, may I ask why now? Lara straightened her back. Because I needed time to build proof, and because now I have something none of them expected. Power, not just emotional, legal, financial, and moral. She paused, looking at the faces before her. I am not just asking for justice for myself. I'm asking you to make a statement for every young designer silenced by legacy, for every woman told her truth is too inconvenient to matter. The meeting ended with tension so thick it could be cut with a pair of fabric shears. As the room cleared, murmurs filled the hallways, lawyers on their phones, journalists catching leaks, board members whispering of consequences. Lara didn't linger. She stepped out into the sun, her husband beside her, into a mob of flashing lights and shouting reporters. She didn't say much, just one sentence over the noise. The proof was never missing, it was buried, but I dug. The next morning, headlines were unforgiving. Devika Rana under investigation. Anjali Sharma banned from Fashion Federation events. Maison de Mode's parent company accepts internal audit. And in the center of it all, a new headline was born. The girl they tried to erase is now writing the rules. The house of cards began to tremble before it fell. Within hours of the Fashion Federation's official statement validating Lara Kapoor's claims, a chain reaction of exits and denouncements erupted like dominoes across the fashion industry. That morning, Devika Rana's flagship boutique in Colaba, once a symbol of regal fashion and ruthless success, sat empty behind its ornate glass, the window mannequins stripped of their embroidered gowns. A single printed notice was taped to the inside of the door, temporarily closed for inventory audit. But everyone knew better. This wasn't inventory. This was erasure. Within Devika's headquarters, chaos had set in. Phones rang off the hook. Influencers and former brand ambassadors pulled their scheduled posts. Model agencies began to quietly withdraw their talents from upcoming shows, citing brand misalignment. Internally, her PR team was drowning. Reena Malik, Devika's sharp-tongued PR director, was practically hoarse from spinning statements that no longer held. We can't claim misunderstanding anymore, she whispered to Devika during a tense meeting. There are digital trails, legal affidavits. This isn't just bad press, it's public excommunication. Investors began to pull out swiftly. Alta Global, one of the largest private equity firms backing Devika's expansion into Europe, terminated their contract. A leaked email stated plainly, "We cannot risk association with fraudulent creative practices or legal instability." The fallout didn't stop there. Luxury retail platforms like Zephron, Ivory Lane, and Third State removed Devika's collections within 48 hours, replacing her catalog with curated pieces from new emerging designers, many of whom had once stood behind velvet ropes while Devika's staff laughed at them. Now she was the one locked out. By the end of the week, her net value had plunged by 60%. Board members of her fashion house, many of whom had remained silent during the scandal, began distancing themselves. Her own CFO resigned via email, citing irreconcilable ethical disagreements. Even the staff began to leave. Assistants, stylists, junior designers, people who had once whispered about Lara behind her back started posting cryptic updates on LinkedIn offering resumes and references. Looking for new opportunities in ethical design spaces, one post read, subtly damning the empire that raised them. Worse still were the digital ghosts, screenshots, voice notes, Slack messages that surfaced from former interns. Notes from Devika mocking village girl aesthetics, laughing at middle-class accents, and referring to Lara as the peasant poet. These leaked onto fashion blogs, TikToks, and Reddit threads where the court of public opinion didn't just rule, they scorched earth. Inside her mansion, Devika stared at the television, the remote slipping from her hand. Her face looked gaunt, eyes rimmed in smudged coal that hadn't been refreshed since yesterday. The silence of wealth had become deafening. Her calls went unanswered, her influence was rotting. Anjali too had vanished from the spotlight. Rumors circulated she had fled to Dubai to avoid press harassment. No one followed her. Her Instagram, once filled with curated selfies and fashion tags, now lay dormant, her comment sections flooded with scorn and snake emojis. What Devika hadn't expected, what none of them had, was that Lara hadn't just proven her innocence. She had exposed the architecture of elitism that had protected mediocrity wrapped in privilege. She hadn't destroyed a brand, she dismantled a hierarchy. In just under a week, Lara Kapoor had done what the industry swore was impossible, forced accountability on the untouchable. Now, as the last of Devika's clients rescinded their orders and the walls of her empire cracked beneath her heels, the once untouchable queen of couture realized the one truth her stitched-up throne had hidden for too long. Without the illusion of power, she was nothing but fabric and thread. And Lara, she wasn't done yet. The ashes of a broken empire fertilized the soil of a new beginning. Lara Kapoor stood at the threshold of a modest yet sun-filled studio in Mumbai's Lower Parel district. No glass chandeliers, no imported marble, just whitewashed walls, bolts of raw fabric, and a wide table that bore the echoes of old sewing machines and new hope. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Outside the building, a newly hung sign read, Kapoor Revival Atelier. Beneath it, in smaller font, where stories are sewn back together. It had been 6 weeks since Devika Rana's collapse. Her label had all but vanished from show calendars and retail floors. Fashion journalists called it a couture extinction event. And in its place, Lara had quietly begun building something the industry hadn't seen in years, an atelier rooted not in exclusivity but redemption. The new brand wasn't just a business. It was a reclamation of identity, of fairness, of all the dreams suffocated under elitism and power games. Lara walked across the studio floor, adjusting a rack of fabric samples. Around her, life buzzed with new energy. At one station, Ria, a former intern once dismissed by Devika for not dressing aspirationally, was pinning muslin onto a mannequin with steady hands and a proud smile. At another table, Karen, a textile artist who had quit fashion school after facing ridicule for his rural embroidery techniques, was sketching new patterns inspired by tribal motifs from Kutch. These weren't just employees, they were the forgotten, reclaimed. Lara had handpicked each of them, survivors of nepotism, gatekeeping, and fashion's silent hierarchy. She sent them handwritten letters of invitation, not offers but recognition. "I see what they overlooked," she'd written. "Let's change what fashion values." In a glass-walled side office, her brand strategist, Zoya Khan, a sharp Gen Z thinker who'd once written a viral thread criticizing the industry's obsession with Eurocentric silhouettes, was coordinating with buyers from Japan and South Africa. "They want pieces with heart, Lara," she said, smiling. "Not just labels with weight, that's our edge now." The first line was set to launch in 6 weeks. Titled Molten Thread, it was a collection of 12 pieces, each inspired by a moment in Lara's journey. A dupatta frayed by betrayal, a blouse that bloomed again, a sari pleated like folded regrets. The materials were sourced from local weavers, and every piece had a tag that told a story, not a price bracket. The press couldn't get enough. For once, it wasn't just about glamour, it was about substance. Elle India called her brand the antidote to artifice. Vogue Asia ran a spread with the headline, "Lara Kapoor doesn't just stitch, she heals." But beyond the praise, Lara found something more precious: peace. She no longer worked to prove herself. She worked because it filled her. The sound of scissors slicing cloth, of interns debating drapes and patterns, of chai cups clinking at 4 p.m. This was her new rhythm, not one dictated by legacy but by rebirth. One afternoon, while reviewing final edits of the launch lookbook, Lara received a letter. It came from an unknown address in Delhi. The handwriting was neat, careful. Inside was a single page and a small pin, a tarnished silver brooch shaped like a sparrow. "Dear Lara, you won't remember me. I was the assistant who brought you coffee 3 years ago when you were called into Devika's office to be fired. I watched the way they dismissed you, erased your work. I said nothing. I was scared, but I saved this. It's your brooch. You dropped it as you left, and I kept it, maybe because I hoped I'd return it someday. Thank you for reminding us all that silence isn't safety, it's complicity. You gave many of us a second chance. I'm finally enrolling in design school again. Aisha M." Lara sat with the letter for a long time. The weight of what had happened, not just to her, but to so many like her, settled on her shoulders not as a burden, but as a promise. The next morning, she pinned the sparrow brooch to her kurta before heading to the studio. When her interns noticed it, they didn't ask. They just smiled. They understood. That afternoon, as sunlight poured through the open windows and laughter echoed off the studio walls, Zoya announced, "We're officially sold out of pre-orders for the first 3 designs." Korea and Paris want more. Lara didn't jump, she didn't cheer. She just looked around at the faces she'd chosen, the stories now woven into every seam of her new life, and nodded. "We'll make more," she said, "but not to impress, to express." Because in this atelier, success wasn't stitched in secrecy or silver thread. It was sewn in truth, and it fit everyone. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, but the mood this evening wasn't built on opulence. It was something warmer, electric, sacred, a revival. The annual International Fashion Justice Gala, usually a velvetrope affair dominated by cold nods and colder gowns, had chosen to theme this year's event around truth as luxury. And seated at the head table, beneath a spotlight made of earned admiration and not old money, sat Lara Kapoor. Not long ago, this world had spit her out, branded her naive, called her country bumpkin, rustic, irrelevant, but tonight the stage belonged to her. The invitation had arrived humbly, but the gesture it carried was seismic. The Fashion Federation, the same body once too cowardly to speak up, had voted unanimously to honor Lara with the Trailblazer in Ethical Design Award, not just for her contributions to fashion, but for redefining what it meant to create, to rise, to lead. The gala hall was filled with everyone who had once watched her fall, only now they stood to applaud as she ascended the stage. Clad in a flowing, handloom black sari with a blouse stitched from remnants of her first failed collection, Lara moved with ease. She wore no borrowed diamonds, no heels that needed balancing, just her sparrow brooch pinned over her heart. When she reached the podium, the applause didn't stop. It built wave after wave until Lara gently raised her hand and the hall fell into reverent silence. She paused, looked out at the crowd, and smiled. 3 years ago, I was asked to leave this industry. Quietly, permanently, I was told my ideas weren't refined, that my voice was too loud for such an elegant space. I believed them for a while. But then something happened. Humiliation stripped away the noise. The people who stood by me, some of whom are here tonight, reminded me of the reason I fell in love with fashion in the first place. Not for spectacle, not for celebrity, but because clothing is one of the oldest forms of storytelling. A few heads nodded, some bowed. I was called a simple woman, and I suppose I am. I believe in fabric that feels. I believe in giving interns names, not just tasks. I believe that you don't need to belong to a legacy to become one. She let her words settle. The people who once dismissed me are not here to defend themselves, and I don't need them to, because this isn't about revenge. This is about revival. In the crowd, Zoya wiped a tear. Ria and Karen exchanged proud glances. Even Aisha, the former assistant who'd sent back the brooch, was here tonight, now wearing her own student-designed lehenga and standing near the back, hand on her heart. Today, Kapoor Revival Atelier employs 30 young designers from villages, urban slums, queer communities, and craft clusters that were shut out of the global runway for too long. Our next collection will be co-designed with survivors of labor exploitation. And our first show, will be held not in Paris or Milan, but in Varanasi. Gasps and applause again filled the room. Because I didn't rebuild my career to stand taller than anyone. I rebuilt it to create room for more stories, for more seams, for more second chances. She paused, lifted the trophy, a minimal design shaped like an open pair of hands, and smiled. To anyone watching, anyone who's been told they don't belong, I hope you keep walking anyway. One day, the room that shut its doors on you will need you to hold the keys. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, not a forced one, not the kind prompted by social politics or camera angles. This was raw, earned. After the ceremony, a flood of people came forward, editors, buyers, young designers, even celebrities who once side-eyed her at parties. But Lara greeted each with grace, not grandeur. Her warmth wasn't performative, it was anchored. In a quiet corner of the gala, someone approached her hesitantly. "Lara's, may I?" It was Devika Rana. Her once fierce frame had softened. No assistants trailed behind her. No camera lights circled her. She looked like someone rebuilding silently in the shadows. "I came to say," Devika began, voice low, "that I'm sorry, not because I got caught, but because I forgot that cruelty is never a currency." Lara studied her for a moment. Then, gently, she nodded. "Thank you," she said. "I accept your apology, but I don't carry the weight of what happened anymore." Devika blinked. "You do?" Lara smiled. "No, you were a chapter. I've moved on to another book." And with that she turned, not with bitterness but with clarity. Outside, the night air buzzed with monsoon winds and camera flashes. But Lara walked past the reporters, the glittering cars, and the praise. She found her team waiting by a simple rented van that carried the studio's latest samples. Back to the studio, Zoya asked, already pulling out her laptop. Back home, Lara said, but tomorrow, yes, let's get back to work. And as the sparrow brooch caught the moonlight one last time, Lara Kapoor, once ridiculed, once erased, walked into her future, not as a victim, not even as a heroine, but as the architect of her own redemption.